Hey kids, do you like wrestling? Well, we like wrestling too. We are Shake Them Ropes here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Myself and Chris Novembrino kind of doing a lazy river of wrestling criticism, going through the news and whatever happened in stateside television wrestling. And also, you know what? Sometimes we just like to watch old stuff and talk about that too. Love for you to give us a listen. If you haven't already, we are Shake Them Ropes here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
To the highway in a brand new day. Over the rainbow, gotta let it go. So fast to finger down. Stars tonight together. Here everyone is singing. You can't know what your part. Copy from what the show.
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate for March 27, 2025. We are members of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find us on the Voices of Wrestling podcast feed or on our own dedicated Open the Voice Gate feed, wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on social media at Open Voice Gate. If you'd like to donate to the show, click the link in the show notes. It'll take you to our redcircle.com landing site. You click the red boxes to sponsor this podcast. And you can set up a one-time or recurring donation, no obligation whatsoever, but we would like to thank all of our previous donors. I'm one of your hosts. It's your old pal, Mike Spears, joined alongside, as always, Case Slow. And Case, it's been an interesting week of Dragon Gate where we had a lot of Rey De Parejas action, and we had some action from the week before that finally made tape, but everything in its own way has quickly been subsumed from the show that we had yesterday, Shun Skywalker's SSW Quest IV produce show from Shinjuku Face. And I feel like that's kind of where we need to kind of get into first, don't we?
Can I throw you a non-Dragon Gate topic to start?
Okay, yeah, please do.
George Foreman passed away over the weekend. Obviously, a man known for his grilling as much as his boxing excellence.
And his family naming.
Shout out to his King of the Hill appearance, in which he gets into a fight with Hank Hill, and George number 3 has to pull him away. Is When We Were Kings the greatest sports documentary of all time?
Oh, that's a tough one, because like the natural counter is Hoop Dream.
And I will put the asterisk on this conversation and that I have not seen Hoop Dreams.
Yeah, I think When We Were Kings, just because of the ability to interview people, then also have all of that archival footage with the festivals, and I think also the fact that it took it basically from the day of the Rumble of the Jungle until the release to finally get it out has like a special real place, and especially for Leon Gast, I feel like the fact that it became the Academy Award winner gave it like a certain level of cachet, I feel like. But Hoop Dreams, and I know that out of the two of us, I am the racer boy out of this. I know you keep it to NASCAR and Indy, like a good upstanding American. I like watching people run in electric cars in the middle of the desert. But I think Senna is one of those transformative documentaries, and it really, in its way, Senna, much after both Hoop Dreams and When We Were Kings, kind of kicked off, at least to me, like the next generation of documentaries and how it relates. And I'm choosing to keep the 30 for 30 aside, because they're their own kind of thing, I feel like.
Well, they're definitely a different tone.
Right.
It's funny you say that about When We Were Kings, about how they have the benefit of not only the archival footage, but also the talking head interviews. And the thing that I like most about it is actually how few people they interview. It's pretty much Norman Mailer, George Plimpton, and then
Spike Lee.
and then Spike Lee has like three little quotes in it. Like, he's barely in it, but it's so sparse in the way that they use those people that I actually think it works to their benefit to such an amazing degree. I had seen it before, but I rewatched it over the weekend, and it's entertaining enough where it's like, okay, it's Ali and Zaire, and then you cut to a BB King performance, and then it's
right, because
more
Mabude Sekisoto decided that he wanted to like make the year of Zaire, and like got everyone to do a musical festival that was supposed to go along with it, that went out the window because Foreman got injured before the fight, and they had to delay the fight for.
Well, that's the crazy thing, right? Is so it's it's Ali and Zaire, and then it's a BB King performance, and then it's more Ali and Zaire, and then it's a James Brown performance. And then Foreman gets cut, and they can't, like, Ali tries to get the fight moved back to America, and they can't do it. So everybody's like, all right, you got to hang out in Zaire for an extra 6 weeks. And the point that I'll steal from, I know Bill Simmons made this point when he talked about it a little bit ago on his podcast, was like, we're truly at peak magazine writer at this moment in time in 1974, where all the beat writers for this fight are just paid to stay in Zaire for another 6 weeks.
It's a little surprised like Hunter S. Thompson didn't get to.
No kidding.
To go with that, because like especially like with George Plimpton and Norman Mailer at that time, like there used to be a pre-influencer career where you would just go around to events and your reports of it were so interesting and you were such of a figure that it would basically fund your entire lifestyle.
Is Chuck Klosterman the last guy that exists like that?
I mean, I feel like Klosterman came in at so much at the end, and he kind of, and you brought him up, like his relationship with like Bill Simmons kind of like sidelines him in a way. Like I couldn't tell you the last time outside of the overall Ringiverse that I could refer to anything from Chuck Klosterman.
Well, his last book, The 90s, is an excellent read.
I mean, like that's his wheelhouse.
It's a Chuck Klosterman book, you know what I mean? Like he didn't exactly reinvent the wheel, but it's his history of the 90s, and he's still got his fastball. It's an absolutely phenomenal read.
Yeah, I just feel like though that like he kind of comes in at an era where like Mailer and Plimpton like were like these like men of culture in a way.
Yeah,
like in the same situation where you would also on the political side would have like Gore Vidal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that you would like very easily be like, oh yeah, George Plimpton has just done some participatory journalism. Now he's going to go and have a long interview with like I'm blanking Tom Snyder, but like that they had like that kind of outsized role though, Case, that like like I feel like that's the other side of this is like the death of the late night host as a way of like cultivating consciousness.
You're preaching to the choir right here.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
true.
It's the biggest behavioral change that I've had post-COVID. And part of it is just because it lines up with Conan's retirement from late night. But we're talking even in an era of streaming and these shows being on YouTube the next morning. I cared so much about late night TV until March of 2020. And I have not cared about it, minus the Conan retirement stuff, a minute long since COVID. It's gone away completely. And plus, the CBS late spot, the evolution of that going from Snyder, who has incredible archival footage, to Kilborn, who I love.
Craig Kilborn was my talk show host.
Okay.
So like I still follow the guy on Instagram.
He's awesome. He's fantastic.
Yeah. Do you see him on Instagram? Like
I do every once in a while because I'll lurk because he and Ryan Russillo became friends.
Yeah,
and I like when they do audio.
Yeah. Craig Kilborn kind of gets blackballed from Hollywood for being a dick, and then like reemerges 20 years later with an Instagram account where he's just being like an effete man of leisure.
Yes,
and it's amazing. It very much is like Case when you think about like, oh, Mike on a lark, like what is he like? what does he just daydream about? It is living a life very much like Craig Kilborn portrays himself on Instagram.
Yeah, to go from Snyder to Kilborn to Ferguson, and I'll get lost in a Craig Ferguson wormhole every now and then because he's just so quick. And then to go from that to Corden.
Corden's the themic break.
I mean, it's so bad because I don't remember if I brought this up on air or not, but I recently watched Friends for the first time, and we finished Friends. Funny show, good stuff. I'm into it. And we watched the Friends reunion on HBO that they did a few years ago before Matthew Perry passed. Yeah. And Corden is the host of it, and he is so bad. I mean, he's not insightful at all. He doesn't have the right energy for it. It is so obvious between, Colbert wouldn't have been the right fit, but Colbert could have done it. Fallon, at least it's like, okay, it's the Tonight Show guy. Like,
but you couldn't get Fallon because this was a WB thing. It's not a Comcast thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So that rules out Seth Meyers as well, who I think probably would have been the perfect guy for it, the right temperament and everything. And instead it goes to Corden. I mean, he's atrocious. And then Corden left, and I got to be honest, I don't know who does the Late Show on CBS now.
Well, it's no longer.
The Taylor Tomlinson thing now?
Right. Yeah. It's at midnight. It's at midnight. They basically gave her another name that you never ever hear anymore with that, like at midnight. It's like, oh yeah, no, she ended up getting. I'm blanking on him now. How am I blanking on him?
Chris Hardwick?
Chris Hardwick, who was like another figure who was everywhere at a certain point.
It's funny. This actually came up at work recently where it's a little like how, we'll talk about at times like, oh, if you weren't there in 2014, you don't know what Shinsuke Nakamura's charisma was like.
Sure.
If you weren't embedded in TV and movie pop culture from like 2013 to 2016, it's hard to explain how omnipresent Chris Hardwick was. He was everywhere. He was respected. He was considered to be cutting edge. And then he had just like a bizarre.
Well, he got Me Too'd.
He got Me Too'd in one of those like gray area ones where he came back 6 months later, and I think everybody has kind of collectively, at least this is my memory of it, every time he shows up, I scratch my chin and go, "Is he supposed to be here? Is this cool? I don't remember what happened. I just remember his name was mentioned." And so yeah, that's like a completely bygone era now. But
he apparently still hosts The Wall.
The Wall.
It is a game show that looks like it is just Plinko from Price is Right given in a half-hour format. Man, we got to talk about like the state of the modern game show sometime.
Oh my god. Oh, I mean, what's the one that Rob Lowe hosts? The Floor. Which I think is just a government-sponsored re-education program post-COVID.
Derek Corbin was on the first season of The Floor case.
Oh boy.
And he was like bound to oh no, like it feels like it was something they engineered during like peak 6 feet away from each other COVID, and they built like this crazy floor, so eventually they're going to have to use it. And Rob Lowe is kind of like the Fox person where it's like, what do we have to do with this? Well, let's just have Rob Lowe do it. But it also is like the most mind-numbingly bad game too. It's listing things.
I don't get it. I mean,
it's listing things. Case there's nothing to get. It's like
that's what I mean.
Category
like,
can you list the most like breakfast cereals?
Okay,
and then you go and you list it for 20 seconds.
That's what I mean by it's like a re-education program that's government sponsored, because the only clips I see are like they'll show a picture of a horse and it'll be like horse, and then they get it like that's the answer. It's like, oh
right, no, that is the answer. The answer is horse.
I thought there was going to be more to this, but I guess not. I guess this is just the whole game now.
Yeah, no, Rob Lowe is also one of those figures too.
Rob, you would know about this, I think, maybe a little bit because of your brother and where he's at. And I promise we'll get to Dragon Gate. It's actually a huge Dragon Gate week, but I want to talk about this for a second. I just saw a clip of Rob Lowe and Adam Scott talking about how nothing is shot in LA anymore.
Yeah.
And it's because California doesn't give tax credits to people who film there.
Yeah, no, it just so happened that like eventually Hollywood, like there is still stuff like, and especially like your weekly live programming stuff or like your daily live programming stuff, like they still have like studios and all of that out in LA. It's just, and it's like been a 30-year progression though of like the tax
blew me away. I had no idea.
The tax rebate shuffle like well, like we're talking like dating back to the 90s, people were starting to move out of LA for shooting everything. Like everyone goes where the tax rebates are, and it really started. I mean, X-Files was the first show that I feel like was the first big like, oh, we don't shoot in LA, we shoot in Vancouver show in the 90s. And it just kind of like progressed to it. And like that's one of the big things about the wildfires. We're using it as kind of like a rallying cry to get people back in LA shooting things.
Interesting. Yeah, it struck me as so interesting, I think partially because I just watched The Departed for the first time, which
Sure.
I don't need to break any news here. Good movie. And The Departed was mostly filmed in New York because Massachusetts wasn't giving tax credits at the time.
Right.
And then it's this Boston-based movie, and it basically got back to the government, and they were like, well, this has to change. And so by the time the town came around, it was like, all right, you guys are filming this in Boston. Like, we'll bend over backwards for you to film this in Boston, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, like that's the same thing with how whenever a wrestling show is in Georgia, you have the Made in Georgia thing, and they get a tax rebate for doing something there. Like everything is based, really, if you're talking about like entertainment, like LA still has its outsized presence, but I think like most of the people, and I'm so far out of that game now, Case, but everyone was heading to Atlanta in the 2010s, and part of that was because Walking Dead, and that kind of just like when you have a show like that really kind of propels thing, and then you have a number two punch of Tyler Perry doing all of his stuff in Atlanta. Before you know it, it becomes like the head of Marvel Productions, and then everyone is being shot in Georgia now.
Fascinating. Yeah, the Rob Lowe clip really caught me by surprise. I didn't realize how barren it had become out there outside of like your shows like The Floor. That was very interesting to me. Final anecdote I have on this topic, and then we'll move on. You mentioned Tom Snyder. My recommendation to everybody on Earth is to go on YouTube and watch Tom Snyder interview The Clash in 1981. He does a sit-down interview with them, and then The Clash played the Magnificent Seven. And man, we have strayed away from God's light, both in terms of musicality and in terms of what you can accomplish on a late night talk show and in a panel interview. Oh man, Mike, I tell you, they do not make them like that anymore.
No, they don't. And I don't even want to get into the UK interview talk show that I've been like obsessed with as like a concept and never seen a minute of. Like there was one talk show that they would just start talking, and just because of like how it was set up and like Watershed there, they would just keep on going until like they would start at 9 p.m. and there would be episodes that would go up to like 3 a.m.
I only know Jonathan Ross and Graham Norton.
Okay, yeah.
Jonathan Ross, funny guy. I like him. He interviewed Morrissey once, and he was very, very funny. And so that's you have my attention from that point on.
I'm trying to think of a way to segue from former BBC One like cultural maven Jonathan Ross to Shun Skywalker.
Well, let me say this real quick, because we're going to do all contemporary Dragon Gate today. We're going to do contemporary Dragon Gate next week. Next week we'll have the review, the finals of Rey De Parejas, and then we'll talk a little bit more about WrestleMania weekend, because we have the full cards for the two proper Dragon Gate shows. There's so much this week. We'll hold off on that. There's no rush to do that. We'll start breaking that down next week, because I really like that Wednesday card, and I think that Friday card has some potential. Before we fully dive into it, a huge thank you to everybody who has listened to the first 3 episodes of Those Days, a Michinoku Pro retrospective series. I am floored and delighted by the feedback. This has been a scary project. It was one that I was, especially in the week before we recorded the first episode, incredibly nervous about whether we could pull it off, whether the shows would be entertaining, whether anybody would care about it. The feedback has been tremendous. I'm incredibly happy with our end of things, and I'm incredibly happy with the response. We'll take a few weeks off and then come back with episode 4. So if you're behind, now is the time to binge those, get caught up so you're ready when episode 4 drops, because we still obviously have a lot to cover.
Yeah, no, it kind of worked out for us that we would do kind of the 1993 drop and then moving to more of a sporadic formula. But yeah, no, I mean, Case, this is a kind of just interesting project that I think in a way scratches a lot of itches that we have and how we find and what we find interesting in pro wrestling with it. And I mean, yeah, thanks to everyone for the warm feedback, even for the dumb little videos I've started to put together as previews. So y'all will know what week of the next episode drops in April, because I'm already scouring for the 24-hour notice video footage for next time. I don't know if anything's going to top Sabu trying to break a table.
Sabu was really good, and I was going to tell you initially to use a clip of Super Delphin and Santo doing world-class lucha libre, but when Sabu tries to break a table and fails, that immediately becomes the breakout clip, no questions asked.
It just really is an exhibit of just humanity, and shows that Sabu was always this way. Like there's, but like 1993, he was doing that. But yeah, no, with 1994 is such an interesting year, and we're already getting things together for that episode. And I've already been in a lot of kind of research holes. I think Case now is getting tired of my screenshots. I mean,
it's
the notes.
It is so fascinating because I talked about this a little bit in the last one we did, but it's like, okay, so episode 3, the one that came out this week, if you're listening to this the week that it comes out, it's all about Michinoku Pro and FMW and their relationship and how it's mutually beneficial for both parties. You know, Onita's in love with Sasuke, Sasuke's in love with Onita, and by and large, by the spring of 1994, they're done with each other. Now, obviously, Onita comes back and he works the Sasuke match, and we'll go very, very in depth on that when it happens. But Michinoku Pro changes so quickly because of the Super J-Cup, and distinctly. And just because I know this, because I've put together notes, preliminary notes for the entire series at this point, the business metrics of Michinoku Pro coming to New Japan are so startling. And I don't think people realize that in 94 and in 96, 97, when that relationship is rekindled, it's not Dragon Dia working a Super Juniors promotion, Super Junior tour. It becomes like a thing, capital A, capital T, a thing. And especially in the fall of 94,
basically like supplementing the entire New Japan Junior division at that point.
I mean, supplementing the entire New Japan Junior division, but then drawing like the Super Junior Tag League in 94 outdraws the heavyweights. And Dave at 94 is marveling at it. You know, he can't believe what he's seeing. And it's just, I think it's kind of been lost to time. And it's a way that we just treat junior heavyweights on a global scale where we never give them box office credit, even if we should. And that's one of those things with those days is I think it's time we really relitigate the box office success of, in particular, Sasuke, but also to some degree Delphin in the mid-90s, because I think it's going to surprise some people with the business they were doing.
Yeah, and especially when you consider that it's a business that kind of has multiple like phases, and it goes, okay, now they're going to the New Japan phase, and then you look down and you look up and it's 96, and now Michinoku Pro's about to run Sumo Hall, and it's one of those things that I've liked, and just to kind of part the curtain for this, I like how distinct kind of everything is, like, and at least from like how we've done from 1993, it was very at least the style is very clean. Like, okay, we're done with Delphin versus Sasuke's over. Okay, cool. Now that's like the nice kind of way that they set up their schedule, was in like such like cleanly delineated kind of things that I think really helped, at least for the first 3. And then as we get into 94 coming up in April, things get really interesting in a lot of different ways really quickly.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Also interesting this week, I think Dragon Gate had a phenomenal week, and I'm ready to talk extensively about Shun Skywalker and SSW Quest IV.
Yep, that's right. SSW Quest IV from Shinjuku Face was yesterday. Completely sold out show there. We'll also touch some on the Rey De Parejas action. We ended up getting that Okayama show after we recorded last week, and it seems like we also have a show that was not put up. Like on the 22nd show, we don't have footage on, but we'll talk a little bit about Okayama and Gifu as well. But Shun Skywalker Quest IV from Shinjuku Face, 546 spectators, and really seeing at least like point of comparison this year to last year, moving away from Buyuden, having a Shun Skywalker produce show instead, it just had such a different air about it, and it feels like, at least coming out of it, just an unmitigated success as a concept.
Yeah, one of those things to note, and obviously a lot of this credit has to be given to the fact that Shingo and Hiromu and to some degree Bushi were booked on this show, but the show sold out in seconds, and then they added standing room only tickets, and those sold out immediately as well. So they packed this place to a degree that I would say no other promotion has this year, at least that I'm aware of. I mean, let me look here. They claimed 546. I don't have an attendance for the Jiro show there. I don't. Okay, Cage Match is letting me down here live as I shuffle through all of these shows and Shinjuku Face that don't have attendances on them. Noah Sunny Voyage on February 8th. This is not a 1-to-1 comparison, but that did 348. And let me see if I can get a DDT show. Why does DDT not have any attendances
DDT
here?
doesn't announce attendance anymore.
Boy, that is a real pain for this segment. What did Glate do? Glate did 232.
Yeah, no, Glate did, and that was for an MMA show recently.
I'm looking at the G Rush show from January.
The Into the G Rush tournament. Yeah, no, but I think also, like, talking about, like, this can be like a kind of a branching thing. It was notable that every single match was sponsored on this show. And there was a big effort, at least I know, from the SSW Quest socials, and then in the graphics that were at Shinjuku Face, it was like that this was a show that was based around Shun Skywalker's idea that not only was he able to sell out in such a brief period, just really with Hiromu, Bushi, and X versus those three as a match, you also have the fact that he was able to get 6 matches sponsored by 6 different things, and not necessarily things that you necessarily see DG sponsors for. Like, they're brand new names to me out.
It's the kind of thing that after the success of this first event, I can't fathom them not doing a second one. And if I'm somebody that was either in attendance for this show, let's say I bought a ticket mainly to see Shingo, or I'm somebody that lives in the Tokyo area that likes Dragon Gate but couldn't get a ticket to the show, there's nothing that would stop me from being in person at another version of this show, because I thought what was so interesting about this, and we'll talk in just a second about sort of the history of these Dragon Gate adjacent produce shows. This one felt the most, I don't know if necessary is the right word, but it reflected Dragon Gate canon far more so than another produce show, while also still living in its own universe, also having an entirely different atmosphere and vibe, and a better atmosphere and vibe than a modern day Dragon Gate show. I mean, this was a home run from every perspective, minus the appearance of Sonata, which is just because he's Sonata and he can't help it. He's just bad at what he does for a living. But everything else on this show, I mean, they're going to have to do this again. And whether it's with another fleet of New Japan guys, even these LIJ guys again, minus Naito, or whether it's with Kaito Kiyomiya, or whether it's with, whoever else, Shun
Taiji
Skywalker,
Ishimori in a Dragon Gate ring for the first time in 17 years.
Taiji Ishimori, I don't. Kakuta is doing the Champion Carnival. Maybe there's an All Japan payoff there. I don't know what it is, but I don't even think for a second show you would need that big of a special guest to at the very least sell out the original seating chart that they had, minus those standing room tickets. I mean, this to me is something they have to do again, whether it's in the summer or in the fall. And I think for the time being, I think this is one of those concepts. We'll all know it when it's dead. We'll see it, and it just won't be as fun. But right. I think this has legs to it, and I want to see another one.
Yeah, and I think that kind of the petering out of Buyuden in this revival came at a right time to kind of completely shake things up and have something presented just like this. And it's kind of worth noting that they did stuff on the shows leading up to SSW Quest IV, in particular, Diamante getting mind control masked in Gifu the night before, that I feel like you could play around with just with the Dragon Gate roster, with the a little bit of the New Japan basis, but also with whatever freelancers there. I feel like that this is a pretty healthy formula to go back to, and you don't necessarily end up in the trappings of a Buyoden where, I mean, we got to a certain point where it was like, okay, that's cool that we are getting Minorita versus the guy he trained with doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but is that really what we're doing with this concept? Yeah, this has absolutely fresh legs and vision, and I mean, the to the greater point, the fact that at least there's been as such a market interest in this. I mean, it would not surprise me like the fact that a lot of this having Shun Skywalker's tone and his path forward. You also have the fact that by the fact you're kind of letting him at least dictate, at least themically and creatively with that I think it provides a necessarily outlet for him, at this point, without necessarily having to inhabit a role in the title picture that he does not feel like he needs to be a part of right now, or does not feel like Shun just complicates things if he's in the Dreamgate picture. But the idea of Shun doing these shows, and then, I mean, I don't know necessarily if you want to kind of base this around the Shun and Shingo kind of storyline they had going into this, with the idea that they still really don't have any sort of conclusion, and there was overtures being made in the post-match, as one would expect overtures being made. But it really does feel like it has legs, and you could just go like, okay, is Shun going to mind control mask Jackie Kamei, and we get like heel Kamei for a show? Like, there's a lot of things you could do with this.
A lot of things you could do. I mean, it goes back to the conversation we had a month ago about the issues in production that I think everybody has with Dragon Gate right now.
I have a point I wanted to make about that.
Yeah, just real quick,
yeah,
the presentation of this show, and I'm not even talking about the lighting or the sound or anything like that, but just the atmosphere of this show was so reminiscent of Toryumon show from a peak Toryumon year, because it felt like nothing else, and it felt like they were really striving for this vision that if you buy into, you might enjoy this show on a surface level without it, but if you really buy in to whatever world they're trying to place you in, this show gets ratcheted up a level. And I think that was true of Toryumon, and I think it was true here. And I do think, despite the fact that, again, all of the units in Dragon Gate right now are units that I really enjoy, you don't have that on a show in, show out basis. The Dragon Gate difference from a presentation standpoint has never been more similar to a New Japan or an All Japan or a Noah, and that is of great hindrance to Dragon Gate specifically.
Yeah, and I think some of the production differences you have in this show, I wonder how much of that was the fact that you're in Shinjuku face and the facilities that are available, and knowing like, okay, we're going to have a video screen to play with, versus the fact that they never use the video screen in normal Dragon Gate stuff too. It
made me wonder if they should do Korakuen and Shinjuku face every month. Now, they're not selling out Korakuen shows even at 1,500 people, and they haven't. So it's a tough sell to say, hey, we should run Tokyo more, but
run Tokyo differently.
Run Tokyo differently, because I also think, and I'm going to say this with full awareness, that Dragon Gate is a Kobe-based company, and their home is there, and they always seem to want to tell their stories through the lens of, we're going to come to Kobe and this is going to happen. But if there is a modern day equivalent, or at least if there could be a modern day equivalent of a Kobe Chicken George, it does feel like this promotion could make some cool stuff happen in Shinjuku face, because the reality of it is not only by size, but just by atmosphere and by tone, it's a dramatically different building than Korakuen Hall is. And I love the way that they handled their Korakuen shows, especially the last 6 months of last year. This year, I think it's been hit or miss, but I would love to see them hum along in Korakuen, but then also have a different style of show that hits on different angles, or at least adds two angles in a different way in Shinjuku face.
Yeah, and I think that that's not necessarily like betraying the Kobe basis of the promotion when there's already a specific Kobe show every month that is its own kind of thing in Lapis Hall.
That's true.
So I don't think you're like betraying that ethos by just like assuming a reality of like, hey, that maybe there's a concept that we're able to do that will fill up that one, that we can be a little bit more themic. And I think that, like, remember last year of Gate of Nostalgia, imagine doing like that kind of show, but doing it in a building where at least the facilities are able to kind of amp it up in that degree that we got in SSW Quest.
Yeah. Look, they need to do something, because talking shit is not the right word, but you and I, and rightfully so, were so bullish on Dragon Gate from August onwards last year, and you just kind of know it when you're in it, especially with a promotion like this, that 2025 has not been a year to celebrate all that much. Even like the first Corkin of the year, when it was all the singles matches, I think you and I both left that show going, okay, that was good, but that was missing something. And then we progressed to February. It's like, okay, that was good, but that was missing something. And in Rey De Parejas, I'm going, okay, that was good, but it's not what it was. It's clearly missing something. And this Shun show has me more invigorated and invested in a bell-to-bell Dragon Gate show than anything else this year. So they clearly hit on something that the mainline product is not doing, and that's unique for a produce show. I'm kind of burnt out on these in Japan. I'm burnt out on these, especially in America. You will not find me at Spring Break this year. And by the way, do not get fooled. Spring Break will once again be overly long and under-deliver in every way.
Do folks think like Ultimo's going to do like that over 50 Rumble? Like, that's like an insult to like guys like that's ego. Like, that's not going
on now.
It's going to be like Mike Jackson. You're going to enjoy it.
And look, everybody's right. The card on paper does look better than it has in the last few years, but that show is not. It's not going to be good. Do not fall for it. Okay, I'm going to be there.
It's also going to be like 5 hours long.
I'm not doing that. I am not doing Spring Break. I will not fall for it.
We have to go to the Fontainebleau and go see Gronk Island.
I have this real issue with America right now. And look, there's a few to choose from. It's ripe for the picking, but the way that mainstream culture has become dominated by hillbillies and frat bros is so disturbing to me. Hillbillies are always going to have some sort of place. Your big country music star that ignores what country music was built on in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and instead they spew right-wing propaganda through their music, and people love it. And look, that's just, I've accepted that that's going to be always a touchstone of American history. But all of these barstool-adjacent frat bros and these Rob Gronkowski types that cling on to relevance somehow, I thought once they hit like 25, that's when their lives should be over. And if you're a pro athlete, you get a longer lifespan because you're in the public spotlight. But once you retire, and if you don't become an on-screen analyst, then your relevancy is over. And now all these frat bros and these hillbillies are hanging on. And now we have something like Rob Gronkowski's beach house or whatever it is in Las Vegas for WrestleMania weekend. And Mike, I'm utterly disturbed by it.
I just think that people watching there would be great.
What was the quote that I pulled from the we were talking about this in the Voices of Wrestling Slack today.
How
it says this is
curated,
a sentence. Yes, this is from gronkbeach.com. It says, produced by Medium Rare, who I work in the music industry. I'm unfamiliar with Medium Rare. Produced by Medium Rare with headliners Flo Rida and Valentino Khan. Gronk Beach will continue to raise the bar, bringing unparalleled Gronk family energy to Vegas. Mike, I'm going to shoot myself. I don't know what to do with that.
And of course, I love that Brandon Thurston made sure to toss in Valentino Khan, nephew of Nick Khan.
It's fantastic.
I mean, that's just the world we live in now. The Gronkowskis are just going to inhabit like a position of our life. Like, it's not going to go away with Rob Gronkowski case. Like, that's the utterly sad thing, is that you used to have like pro athletes that, if they manage their money, they probably would go like buy like 20 Wendy's franchises.
Yeah, car dealership or something.
Yeah. We're not going to Rob Gronkowski Kia. Okay, like that's just not how he's going to recede into it. Like, he's going to be out there with Barron Trump and X Ash
yes.
12, and like they're going to be like arguing over our oxygen rights in 20 years. Like that's just accept that. Like that's the world.
I thought Steve Harvey should have murdered him on live television. Do you remember New Year's Eve a few years ago when Steve Harvey had a Lego bust made of him and Gronk on live TV smashed the bust? And Steve Harvey very clearly did not want that to happen.
Yeah, he was probably going to take it home and put it in his like home office.
Oh my god! I mean, it was an incredible tribute to an American legend and Steve Harvey, and Gronk smashed it. And I thought at that moment I was going to witness a justifiable homicide on live television.
Yeah, we kind of list moments when like celebrities will just snap on each other.
Yeah, no. Instead, we're gonna get in 2032. We're gonna get Gronk and country music sensation Jelly Roll running for president and vice president of America, and they'll win. So that'll be great. I look forward to that. Briefly, before we continue on SSW Quest, there's a number of things we want to talk about with this show. The history of the Dragon Gate produce show.
Right.
Just anecdotally, in case maybe this is your first one, maybe the Booyadin shows, like, when that was announced that the Booyadin shows were returning, that was a big deal to people like Mike and I, but maybe those didn't catch your fancy because you just didn't really know what they were and the lineup should have enticed you. This is something that would have come into play entirely in a Dragon Gate universe. Mike, I have no recollection of any sort of Toryumon shows like this. There was never an Italian Connection produce show or, a Crazy Max produce show. Those were all mainline Toryumon shows.
Yeah, and a lot of, I think, some of these produce shows really coming about was kind of, in a way, like we talked about, like Kobe Chuck and George, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, at a certain point, and especially in the transition between Toryumon Japan to Dragon Gate, running 150 standing room venues just did not necessarily play anymore. It became a point about where they were running in the venues, and with that it just was not necessarily like such a focus point. And especially during like the Toryumon days, you would also have the aspect of it that instead of necessarily doing a produce show, you would have the studio shows too. So you wouldn't necessarily need that like creative itch as much when it would be like, okay, who's going to be in the studio for Vamonos Amigos this month too?
Yeah. So the first one we have on record is November 12th, 2006. This was Stalker Ichikawa Bombay. I bring this up because it's historically incredibly important in Dragon Gate because Ishin Riki worked this show, and Riki Ihashi and Ishin Ihashi were backstage at this show. And I think Riki specifically credited this with making him want to become a pro wrestler. So we have Stalker Ichikawa Bombay to thank for Ishin, basically.
Yeah, and this first show was kind of done as a for a while, Stalker Ichikawa was threatening retirement a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And he, especially at this time, if you think about our shows that we've talked about, things like Tozawa Juku in 2006, like the position of people like Akira Tozawa was being forced into kind of these comedy like roles. So they made this into an entire 2 out of 3's retirement falls match, and Akira Tozawa won, so Stalker had to retire, but he renamed himself Stalker Ichikawa Z afterwards. So it kind of became one of those things. I'm right now looking at this card case, and it's interesting just because of like how a vestige of 2006 it is.
You mean like Kevin Steen being on the show?
That is exactly, Wrestle Jam happening right there. But also to the aspect of you would have stuff like, and this is very kind of interesting for us given the episode of Those Days that came out this week. If you're listening to this currently, you get a Mr. Pogo and Katsunari toy death match on it, and it's just kind of just a interesting just kind of shade of that, but also in a way celebrating a point of at least like people within like wrestling in the 90s and into the early 2000s that were around the time with Stalker Ichikawa and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So then in January of 2007, you get the first Masaki Mochizuki Booyadin show. This one actually takes place in Cork and Hall, and this one made TV. This is pretty readily available. The again, speaking of those days, the Dick Togo Men's Teo Taka Michinoku versus BB Hulk Shima Matt Seidel match is incredibly entertaining. You'll be shocked to hear, Mike, but Matt Sydal and Dick Togo, good chemistry. Two good wrestlers that could do some good work together. So that show happens in January of 2007, and then
it's such a wild show also because you get kind of the battle arts match in the main event, Masaki Mochizuki and Minoru, aka Minoru Tanaka, versus Hidaka and Fujita, like one of the premier junior heavyweight tag teams of like 2000 and like the early 2001. This one case, something worth noting, one of the lower points of Dragon Gate comedy happened during the Dino and Tozawa match.
Oh, of course. Well, Dino was involved, so that would be victim by association there.
Yeah. There was a time where like clips of that match was like message board fodder. I remember specifically.
Oh, interesting. I don't remember that. I have obviously not seen the match. I've avoided it like the plague, so that's good to know.
You're good.
Gotcha. So they run that January of 2007, and then 2008 and 2009, pretty much those entire calendar years, they end up running 14 more Booyuden shows across that 2-year span. I think the most historically significant match, or at least the one that people go back to, is they run Shingo versus Sekimoto in a singles match in 2008. And that feels like if you were going to watch one match from this time period, because these would make TV. I mean, they're out there and pretty easy to find. I think the Shingo versus Sekimoto match is the best, and then these would cease in 2009 and then come back in 2011, and those are the ones where it'd be like, the main event of the first Masaki Mochizuki produced Booyuden again was Daisuke Sekimoto, Okuta Hidaka, and Shinjiro Otani versus Masaki Mochizuki, Shingo Takagi, and Susumu Yokosuka. There would just be, they ran 3 in 2011, and the main events in particular are all absolutely insane.
Well, I think about like 2011, you also have, and we'll veer into this, like this was a time also because of the typhoon where Dragon Gate had to run Shinkiba a lot and Shinjuku Face a lot more because of the damage to Korakuen Hall that took.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Though, again, that's why, like when it was announced in 2023 that the Booyuden shows were coming back, it's why people like you and I got so excited. And ultimately, I think one of the necessary pivots away from those shows, even though we were so excited for them, is the Hidakas and Minoru Tanakas and Katsuhiko Nakajima's on a bunch of these shows, and obviously you can't use him. And he would have been available even in 2023. He was just at a different stage in his career. That type of
Gran Hamada is not coming back to do a Super Shenlong 50 match trial series at this point.
And Minoru Tanaka's not walking through that door either.
I wish he would. Though.
Yeah, I agree. But Minonori Sawa, we got Abe on, I think one of the Booyuden shows, and we got Fujita Junior Hayato on the first Booyuden show, and maybe the second one when they returned in 2023. But that type of wrestler has just gone by the wayside, and you could see it reflected in those cards. Whereas in 2008 and 2009, and then again in 2011, it was just a style of wrestler that was more readily available in Japan and readily available to Dragon Gate and Masaki Mochizuki. And so, I think the shows are, I don't want to say overrated, especially like the 2011 ones are one match shows. There's an undercard there, but it's whatever you're getting in the main event that really matters there. In 2007, they ran a Muscle Outlaws produce show, and then the next night, a Mid-Breath Gym sponsored produce show. These made TV. This is notable because the Muscle Outlaw show was headlined by Kotaro Suzuki and Ricky Marvin against Speed Muscle in a GHC Junior Heavyweight title match. It goes 27 minutes. We get most of that on TV. It's very, very good, as you would expect. The next night, and this is the shame of the taping schedule at the time, the semi-main event of that Mid-Breath show is Yoshino and Doi against BB Hulk and Kota Ibushi, and we have about 30 seconds of that match on tape. We basically see the opening sequence and the finish, and that's it. And that is a real bummer. Those do make tape, but all the matches are cut up, and it's not as enjoyable of a watch as it should be.
No. I mean, you have to say at the time for Lupin Matsutani getting the main event there in that Mid-Breath show.
Yeah, certainly a time and place there. There was a second Stalker Bombay show in 2007. I don't believe this made tape. It does not look like a very fun show. There was a Warriors 5 produce show in 2009. that was headlined by Sasuke, Shima, and Gamma against Makato Oshii, Naoki Tanizaki, and Shiryu Ashai. Man,
Yeah.
I don't know who that is. Is that X from Oh, he was a K Dojo guy. He was
Yeah.
actually pretty good.
Yeah, no, he's with all of them in 2AW now.
Yeah, okay. He shows up in 2005 when they're working with Taka. He's pretty good.
Yeah, this Warriors 5 one did not make tape, but it was really kind of featuring a lot of the K Dojo and Michinoku pro people at that time.
And then there is also that same year, there's a World 1 produce show.
Which did make tape.
Yeah, you've seen this. I have not. This was main evented by Koji Kanemoto and Naruki Doi versus Akira Tozawa and Yamato.
Yeah, this show was mostly clipped. I remember like that just because of the time. It had to have been. But Koji Kanemoto and Doi versus Tozawa and Yamato, at least what that made tape was really a lot of fun. Also on this show, Kazuchika Okada defeating Super Shenlong the third.
Yes, because
I'm sorry, Super Shenlong the second. My apologies to Yosuke Watanabe.
Also in 2009, there was that Hayabusa produce show, which wasn't entirely Dragon Gate related, but the main event was Dragon Kid, BB Hulk, and Pac all dressed up as Hayabusa. This never made tape, but the photos of it go around. I thought I'd mention it here. 2011, they bring this concept back, and they do
because this was the time that the Typhoon. It kind of presented them that they needed to do shows outside of Korakuen.
Yeah, it's Mochizuki does 2 in September and then 1 in November, and then this Blood Warriors one also happens in November. And this is relevant for 2 reasons. One, the main event is Shima and Ricochet against Tozawa and Hulk, which is obviously Blood Warriors versus Blood Warriors. Very good match, would recommend that. It's also the Japanese debut of Uha Nation, who came in Blood Warriors affiliated. He squashes Kotoka, and Uha up until he blew out his knee, but then even when he comes back, it was such a star in Japan. And it's crazy to think, Mike, I don't know if you realize this, but he signed in March of 2015. He's been gone from Dragon Gate for 10 years.
Yeah, no. Credit to Uha keeping the bag though.
No,
10 years.
I thought when he got signed, he was the most obvious slam dunk superstar there's ever been, sheerly because of his raw charisma and likability. Turns out I was wrong. They haven't figured out a way to market that, but 10 years of securing the bag, good for him.
Also on that show, so that Twin Gate match was the last one of the Spike Mohicans run because they vacated it immediately afterwards because Shima and Ricochet wanted to go after the Brave and Dream Gate to end out 2011.
That's right. That plays on the Final Gate. I completely forgot about that. Huh. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so that's 2011, and then we go a very, very long time without anything like this. It's 2023 when you get the return of those Mochizuki Boyuden shows. That same year, and I'll mention this one quickly because you can find the link in the Open the Voice Gate channel on the Voices of Wrestling Discord, but there was also the Toro Washi debut anniversary show that happened in February of 2024. And that had the in-ring return of Pescatore Yagi. It was the first time that he had wrestled in, I think, 20 years. So that's sort of the history of how we got to these shows. I think the thing that is so exciting about the Shun Skywalker one, that's SSW Quest, is it's no secret that you and I think the general viewing population, they think of this time with Skywalker as an incredibly important time historically, one of the very best, and we'll obviously talk about that here in just a second when we get into the main theme we have going on this week. But the nice thing about this SSW show is it gets put in the time capsule. When somebody 5 years from now, 10 years from now is looking for recommendations or looking to understand the history of Dragon Gate better, we can point to this show that was so just unadulterated Shun Skywalker. We can go, this is kind of what it was like. This is the pull that he had. This is the charisma that he had. This was the look that he had and the feel that he had. And it all comes together on this show in a way that, the Blood Warrior show, I think, kind of has that feel. The Muscle Outlaw show doesn't. The Boyuden shows, again, it's a certain type of thing that they were going for, but it's so disconnected from Dragon Gate. And I think this does the best job of feeling like, hey, if you're a Dragon Gate fan, you're going to love this show. But also here's like an extended universe type thing. And it's just, it all came together in such an incredible way.
Yeah. And I think that just also like the other things that were added on to the show. Like, I mean, Dragon Kid made his in-ring return as an X on the show. You had a lot of interesting things coming out of that semi-main event. I mean, it really kind of became the Muto School class reunion there. But you were also, in a way, having Johnny Valletta in kind of in a match that he would never be able to really have in Dragon Gate as a singles wrestler. The expanded universe kind of idea, I think, is really an apt way to describe it, because it was not just about Shun Skywalker. It kind of really played into what really is Z-Brats in March of 2025.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, you can put it in the time capsule now. It's something that I think is gonna ultimately matter in the legacy of Shun Skywalker, not swaying anybody one way or another in terms of who was he better than. But it's just a nice thing to have. It's something that we don't have with Shima, we don't have with Yamato, we don't have with Susumu, but Shun has this show in such a defining era of what has become, really special career now, almost 9 years in. And I'm very glad they hit the show out of the park the way that they did. And what it made me think of as we get into this main event here, well, and we'll go top down, but we're going to spend a considerable amount of time talking about this, I think, is we're now on this run of 5 years with Shun Skywalker, 2020 to 2025. And the reason, I mean, look, I rewatched a match of his from 2018 today and was blown away by how good Shun was. It was actually, it was way better, and he specifically was way better than I remember him being. I watched Mochi and Shun versus Yamato and BB Hulk from Dangerous Gate 2018, and Shun blew me away in that match. He's tremendous in 2019, but we all knew that already. But it's something different in 2020. He comes back as a main eventer from that excursion, wins the title, builds Masquerade, and goes from there. We're on this 5-year run with him, at least almost 5 years with Shun, that I just think is one of the best 5-year stretches that we've seen from any Dragon Gate wrestler ever. And so, Mike, what I've done is I've got a list here of 8 wrestlers, and we'll go chronologically through what I think are the best 5-year periods of any wrestler in Dragon Gate history. I've got 8 of them down here. What I'll do, I'll go one at a time. I'll say the wrestler, I'll read the year, I'll read off some of their accomplishments and sort of why it makes them so special, and then you can react to that, okay?
Yep, and we'll close up talking about Shun's 5 years.
Of course, right? Yes, yeah, because that would be 2020 to 2025. Too many 20s in that sentence. But the first one to me is Shima from 2000 to 2005. This is Shima as the leader of Crazy Max, and then transitioning into the first year of Blood Generation. I had this down initially as 1999 to 2004. I would say 2004 was kind of the weak point there, but 2005 was such a strong year. I wanted to shift just ever so slightly and go, I always say that I think the 2 best years of Shima's career are 1999 and 2018, because it's when he's doing work in Michinoku Pro and then work in Wrestle 1. And those to me were always just a little bit more interesting than the overall Dragon Gate catalog that's there. But 2005 is got to be the high point of his Dragon Gate specific career. So I threw 2005 in there. But again, Crazy Max and Blood Generation, those are the 2 units that he's in during the time. He's in the trios match on August 14th, 2001. He's in the trios match, the 3-way trios match, July 7th and July 14th, 2002. Of course, 8/30/03, the 4-way trios match, that happens during that time. Not to mention, you close out 2005, July 3rd, 2005, Blood Generation versus Do Fixer, their best match ever at Kobe World. Just some of the matches that Shima had during that year. You go to the Observer Awards. Okay, 2000. He finishes 9th in most outstanding, 8th in most charismatic. He's 3rd best in flying wrestler, 9th in feud of the year, which is Crazy Max versus M2K, and 5th in best gimmick, which is Crazy Max. 2001, he's 4th in best flyer, he's 6th in reader's personal favorite, and he's 9th in feud of the year, Crazy Max versus Torimon versus M2K. As we've seen historically throughout time, there are years where the Observer and the Observer readers are really invested in Torimon and Dragon Gate, and there are years where they entirely fall off. So Shima falls off those year-end ballots 2002 through 2005, but obviously I think anybody with a clue knows that he's still one of the very best wrestlers in the world during those years. So Shima 2000 to 2005, I think, would be the first entry on this list.
Yeah, and I think 1999 as a year, not really kind of the year you'd attribute really to anyone, and if you would attribute to anyone, it probably would be Magnum.
Mhm.
Like with that, but then Magnum falls off such a steep cliff as he starts getting injured. Yeah, I think for Shima, this 5 year period is kind of the height of his powers, at least athletically. I mean, you look at that time period ending out the aughts, and he's now incredibly a different physical wrestler than he was in the year 2000. And even though, like, I think his 2011 through 2012 was a strong stretch for him. You have the Spike Mohicans title tag team run. You have him as Dreamgate champion at that time as well. But I think, though, that at least over that time period, especially with Crazy Max at its peak and the matches that they were having, you go for that 2000-2005 period. Yeah, no, I agree.
All right, I'm with you there. Masato Yoshino next on the list. As I was doing this, I was reminded, like, oh, that's right, Masato Yoshino, good pro wrestler. It's a shame how things have ended up there. Masato Yoshino, 2008 to 2013. So this is Yoshino in World 1, Junction 3, World 1 International, and Monster Express. To name a few matches, him versus Dragon Kid, November 16, 2008. Speed Muscle versus Dragon Kid and Shingo Takagi from the third Dragon Gate USA show. Speed Muscle versus Shima and Ricochet from Dragon Gate USA Chicago 2010. Masato Yoshino versus Don Fuji January 2011. And Masato Yoshino versus Yamato from October 10th, 2013. 2008 Observer Awards, he finishes 4th in Tag Team of the Year and 6th in Best Flying Wrestler. 2009, he's an honorable mention in Flying Wrestler. 2010, he's an honorable mention in Best Flying Wrestler, and he finishes 3rd in Flair Thez voting that year. And then 2011, an honorable mention, him and Pac as a Tag Team of the Year. And I think you and I both, 2013, obviously an incredibly stacked year, a ton of candidates to choose from, but I would put his name in contention as certainly not a winner, but a top 5 or top 10 Flair Thez guy for 2013 as well.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the promotion at the time, 09 through 2011 is a tough time period for his contemporaries. When you look at where things were before the Junction 3 and Blood Warriors angle and the consolidation there and the run with Shima into Mochizuki, or Mochizuki into Shima, my apologies, and how the Big Six were after. He was the one I feel like that kind of did not take the step back that the other 5 did when the after their first runs, really. Like, he just kind of kept on going with it. And it's tough because when you get into 2013, like the person that I would bring up similarly, I think we're going to talk about in a second, he probably has just as much of a claim, at least for like 2011 through 2013, as he does. But I think treading 2009 and 2010 really felt like being Yoshino years. I would go with that.
Yeah, the funny thing with this, and we've talked about this before, is he comes across, if not like a superstar, then at the very least one of the most exciting wrestlers on the planet. 08, 09, 10, and you could throw in 11 there too. And then something happens in 2013 when he wins the belt from Yamato. He just goes up a level so seamlessly, where it's like, oh, I guess now he's just the ace of the promotion now. And it happened in the snap of the fingers, and it happened so quickly, where it's the Yamato win. The next month is the ultimate carry job against T-Hawk, and from there is off to the races. And so the last, I'll say 5 years, because it's the he gets hurt in 2018 really bad. So the 2013 to 2018 period is how we remember Yoshino, just as this unflappable ace heavyweight champion. And it just seemed to happen. It's not that he wasn't great before then, but man, when he goes up that level, it's so natural for him, and it's so jarring to think about that timeline where one day he's just that guy.
Yeah, and he kind of becomes that guy up through the end of his neck injury,
Mm-hmm.
Like, and even though like physically was not the guy coming back from that, at least inhabited a role that really, it took until his retirement that I would say Yamato kind of transplanted him there, or during this time period, Yamato was transplanting him as he was coming back from the neck injury.
Yes. You'll see some overlap in years here, but I feel very strongly about this guy being mentioned. BB Hulk, 2009 to 2014. So we're talking about Hulk in World 1, Blood Warriors, Mad Blanky, and Diehards matches here.
And specifically going up to one specific match, right?
Yes. That's it.
That's how,
it's a very
that's how it works
demarcation.
out with picking BB Hulk from 2009 to 2014. You end on the match of his career that changes the next 10 years of his career.
Yeah, you're so right, because you get him versus Doi in November of 2009. You get him versus Shingo, obviously, at Kobe World 2010. Him versus Mochizuki at Kobe World 2011, which I think has become underrated as time has gone on. Tozawa and Hulk versus Susumu and Kagetora from March of 2012. Tozawa and Hulk versus Doi and Ricochet from Kobe World 2013. And then, you end with Hulk versus Shingo Final Gate 2014, which, again, that was over 10 years ago now. And I say this with Hulk a lot, because whenever I go back and watch Hulk before 2015, I'm just so amazed at how quick he was and how graceful he was and how that wrestler has now been gone for so long. But this might surprise some people that BB Hulk, for a 5-year run, was as good as anybody was in this promotion.
And I think since we're considering Dragon Gate USA as a part of these stretches, I think that you get to see two different times that Hulk is given the ball and running with it. And what you really see, especially from that DGUSA run going into 2014, the thing that we lose, and I don't think we really ever grasp until we get either little glimpses of it, or you go back and watch the pre-Final Gate 2014 footage of BB Hulk, is it's not just how fast he was. It's not just the way he kind of moved. It was how crisp he was with everything.
Absolutely.
And it just whenever he doesn't do the mouse much anymore, but there was never a time that BB Hulk looked like he was going to slip doing the backflip kick. And that was just one of those times that, Hulk's 5-year stretch has to be commended.
2009, he's an honorable mention for Best Flying Wrestler. 2010, which is really the peak of his career, an honorable mention in Flair Thez. Finished 7th in Feud of the Year versus Shingo. An honorable mention for Best Flying Wrestler. And number 4 in Match of the Year that year for the Observer Awards, obviously Shingo and Hulk from Kobe World 2010. You'll notice as we move along here, Mike, there's 3 names that I'm going to mention in a row.
Okay.
They share the same years exactly. And I think this speaks to how good this promotion was during this time period. Masaki Mochizuki, 2011 to 2016. This is him in Junction 3, Team Veterans, and Diehards. Matches would be him versus Yamato, May 5th, 2011. Masaki Mochizuki and Susumu Yokosuka versus Shima and Ricochet from Dragon Gate USA, January 2012. Mochi Fuji and Super Shisa versus Teok Eita and UT from October 10th, 2013. Mochizuki versus Yoshino from January 2014. And obviously Mochizuki versus Shingo from November 2015. 2011, he places 4th in Flair Thez. 2015, he gets a 6th place vote in the Observer Match of the Year for his match with Shingo, and an 11th place vote in the Voices of Wrestling Match of the Year poll with Shingo. He also finishes 9th in the SFM 50 in 2014. There's a lot of years you could choose from with Mochizuki. You could line it up with Shima and go 2000 to 2005. You could go, say, 2008 to 2013. That's a different style of Mochizuki, but it's one that a lot of people love. Obviously,
a lot of Mochi Fuji there, too.
So exactly what I was going to say. A lot of Mochi Fuji. But I think 2011 to 2016 is where Mochizuki is most in the pocket.
Yeah, and it's a shame because I think then, similarly, people can go well, 2018 Mochizuki, and look what he was doing in 2023 with his son, and you're like, maybe you can somehow make that argument, but I mean, he had the best match in Dragon System history during this time period, and he's
And
with
you know what's funny is that could apply to a few different things. I know what you mean with Mochi and I'm assuming Shingo, but
right. Yeah,
again,
Gate
but
Destiny 2015. Right.
yeah, but that that could be Mochi versus Yoshino. Also, that could be
That was a good one.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few different matches where I go, I think he's talking about Mochizuki versus Shingo, but I'm not 100% sure.
But it's just like, and I would argue that I can I guess who your other two people you're going to name during this 2011 through 2016 phases?
Absolutely.
Shingo Takagi, naturally,
Yep.
and Yamato.
No.
Susumu Yokosuka.
No. See, okay, so you're gonna blow my high spot here. There's a few guys that I left off the list because I don't think they have a 5-year period as strong. Let me just hit the points on Shingo here real quick, and then I'll reveal that third guy. So Shingo, this is Junction 3. This is Akatsuki, Monster Express, and Berserk. You've got the Dragon Gate UK match with Susumu in 2011. You've got Yamato, the shocking Dreamgate win in 2013. The aforementioned BB Hulk match in 2014. Shima at Final Gate 2015. And I put in the 2016 cage match here as one of the shining Shingo performances. Like I said, sixth place.
That's probably it for his stretch, though, like ending at that point, though.
Yeah, Yamato Kobe World is where that ends.
Right. Yeah, but but like after that, I feel like you can't really evaluate Shingo in a 5-year stretch.
But you get what you get because he's hurt in 2011. You get a really clean World 2011 to World 2016 run.
Right.
With
Yeah.
Shingo versus Tozawa at World 11, all the way through Yamato at World 2016. After that and before that, it's something totally different. But you actually get like a super clean 5-year break there, world to world. As I mentioned, 6th place match of the year against Shingo in 2015 for The Observer, and 11th in Voices of Wrestling that year. FSM 50, he is 26th in 2015. He is 9th in 2016.
Yeah. I feel like in about 10 years, reassessing Shingo's 2011 to 2016 would be a fun project.
It would be loaded with some of the best matches you've ever seen.
Yeah, no. To just pencil that in for 2036, case.
I'd be more than happy to. Okay, so Mochizuki.
So who's the other person?
I mean, Mike, you got to know your own character on this show. It's Akira Tozawa.
Okay, so you have him returning from excursion in May of 2011. Go up until he leaves.
Up until he leaves.
Yeah, no. Yeah, and coincidentally, I would say Shingo's best tag work happens in that time period because I think his best tag team partner was Akira Tozawa.
It's either Tozawa or it's Dragon Kid.
Yeah, you're talking about Kamikaze era pumping a dragon.
Yeah, there's Summer Adventure Tag League that year is so good. 2008. It's so good. But Tozawa, you get Blood Warriors, Mad Blanky, and Monster Express. You get matches like the Mochizuki Dreamgate Challenge in 2011. I threw in Tozawa, Hulk, and Loki versus Masaki Mochizuki, Pac, and Ricochet from Dragon Gate USA 2012.
That is perhaps the best match in Dragon Gate USA history. Yeah,
it's certainly the most underrated. The T-Hawk match from May of 2014 is unbelievable. The Eita match from 2015 Kobe World is unbelievable. And that I love, and I always have loved, Shima versus Tozawa from May of 2016, that King of Gate match. Mike, this is going to make you miss your favorite wrestler so much. FSM 50. Tozawa goes 10th in 2014, 22nd in 2015, 13th in 2016. Again, it's a little bit is one of those things that if it's like Chris Hardwick, but he's not canceled. Yeah. If you weren't there for Akira Tozawa in the moment, you just don't understand the gravitational pull that this guy had.
Yeah, no, God, we're coming up on 10 years with him too.
Yeah. Oh God, that is really depressing to think about.
I mean, and I don't want to like compare checkbooks, but he is probably still the most well-to-do person out of the Dragon system.
Oh, I don't think it's close.
It matters what you define Okada, basically.
Oh, I wouldn't count him.
Yeah, but so in this case, yeah, no, Tozawa, year 9 of getting that money. Yeah.
So again, just to recap here, you've got Shima 2000 to 2005, Yoshino 2008 to 2013, Hulk 2009 to 2014, Mochizuki, Shingo, and Tozawa 2011 to 2016. We'll end with Skywalker 2020 to 2025. There's one more name on this list, Mike.
Okay.
That fits in between 2016 and 2025. Who do you think that might be?
Okay. Yamato's not making the list, and Susumu's not making the list.
Mm-hmm.
So there's only so many other figures here. I would not say Ben, because Ben, you have way too up and down over the time period. Yoshioka, you have just too much time lost. KZ, I would say maybe KZ 2019, 2024.
KZ is the answer. 2016 to
2021.
2021. Okay. And it really, it goes to show, and I'm guilty of this because KZ is the last name I thought of for this list too. He is so historically underrated. I say this all the time. People are sick of me saying this, but well, you know what? Let me phrase it this way, Mike.
Okay.
So let me go to cage match here. Let me make sure my years add up, because I want to make this point, and it's not disparaging the guy that I'm going to compare him to, but for all intents and purposes, right? Let's say Kento Miyahara. When does he win his first Triple Crown? Does he win in 2014?
It's like
he wins his first. Oh wow, he wins his first Triple Crown in 2016. Okay,
yeah.
So that's perfect. So let's go over the last 9 years. Pound for pound, who do you think has had more great matches, KZ or Kento Miyahara?
I would say KZ, just because other than like Next Stream, like in like tag teams for like a very brief time period, you're not really having that many Miyahara tags.
No, and with KZ, it's the high profile singles matches. He's Mr. February. He's got the really, really high end tag matches,
right?
And he's got all those trios matches. And I think if you asked 100 people, and you and I are two of those 100, 98 people are saying that Miyahara has had more great matches than KZ. And that's not all that makes a wrestler is just the sheer amount of great matches they have. But I'm having this thing with KZ where it's like, well, wait a minute, hold on. He's been legitimately great for 10 years now, and he's doing it on a level that I think few have comprehended. And because he's never been Dreamgate champion, few have been able to put into any sort of historical perspective. But KZ 2016 to 2021, that's Diehards, Tribe Vanguard, Natural Vibes, the Dragon Gate generation, and then Natural Vibes again. And the reason Diehards is in here is the first match that you had mentioned on that list is the match where Diehards disbands, that three-way trios match, February 4th, 2016, one of my favorite matches in the history of the promotion. And then it's the February matches. It's Mochizuki 2018, it's Pac 2019, it's Doi 2020, and then KZ versus Shun at Kobe World 2021, just as a sample size there. Those matches, the Unit Disbands match from 2016, that finishes 31st in Voices of Wrestling's Match of the Year poll that year. The Mochizuki match from 2018 finishes 24th. The Pac match finishes 17th. The Doi match in 2020 finishes 58th. And the Shun Skywalker match in 2021 finishes 36th. His FSM 50 history, he goes 40th in 2018, 32nd in 2019, 20th in 2020, and 22nd in 2021. Apparently, he hasn't been on the SFM 50 since 2021. That has to change. But that is an incredibly strong 5-year resume from KZ. I think as good as anybody on this list, and he's the last guy that I thought of for it.
Yeah, and I think that like it's always the fact that you have basically 2 careers with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And at least, and I know, Case, for you coming in 2014, you kind of got like the end of that. But for those who lived through MCKZ and like Heel KZ, he was great at being a lost post. Like he was really great, but that was very much like a cemented role that it felt like. So the fact that you even really have like the 12-up ramp period in 2015 and then hitting the ground running in 2016 with the Brave Gate run, it's really kind of remarkable, and I feel like it's a as much of a feather in his cap that a Dreamgate run would be in its own kind of way.
It's the thing with him is that I do not think he needs the Dreamgate belt now, nor do I really think he needs it ever. But also, it's going to color the way we think about him historically. You know, as long as he doesn't have it, I think people are really going to struggle to frame him in any sort of historical context.
Yeah, I mean, it's similarly kind of the situation, like not getting completely into Rey De Parejas stuff, but it feels like we are coming to a point where D-Courage is going to fundamentally change, right? Mm-hmm. Like, especially like the cage match, it's probably going to be 3 of D-Courage and then 3 of Z-Brats. At least that's where the hand is being tipped right now. And the issue we have with D-Courage, and Jay brings this up on commentary, the fact that they don't have a Triangle Gate run, throughout the unit, it's kind of disqualifying them from some of those upper level kind of positions. And for KZ, he might get kind of lumped into that, but I think that you don't, and it's kind of ironic that this is the person to compare it to and on the list. It's not a discussion that really Akira Tozawa ever gets, like, when we start talking about this. We don't malign Akira Tozawa for not winning the Dream Gate, but KZ, since he stayed and still hasn't won it, it is kind of a weight, it seems.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. And then obviously we'll finish out the list here. Shun Skywalker 2020 to 2025. And I think it's worth putting 2020 on that list because I always go back and reference the Hokkaido triple shot they ran in 2020, the first tour that Masquerade was on, and how incredible and how fresh those matches felt. You know, they just hit the ground running as a unit. So you've got Masquerade and then Zebrats, obviously. The matches I would mention here, Kaito Ishida in 2021, the Shun and Diamante versus Jason and Jackie Kame match from Kobe World 2022, Madoka Kakuta, Dead or Alive 2023, and the cage match from last year's Dead or Alive, all worth mentioning in this time period that we're talking about Skywalker's career. FSM 50, he goes 11th in 2021, 3rd in 2022, which I believe is what made Joe Lanza almost quit FSM 50 and maybe fold the website. 43rd in 2023, and then 15th last year. Look, I said it all of last year. I said it especially in December when we did that class of 2016 retrospective. We're witnessing something historically great here. We are witnessing something on the level of a Milano or a Magnum or a Shima or a Mochizuki or a Yamato or a Yoshino. This guy is putting up numbers, to use a sports phrase here. We are witnessing one of the best runs in company history. And of the 5-year time periods that I mentioned here, Shun's up there with anybody, you know, and that's what makes this SSW show so special, is that it just felt like a celebration of 5 years of just being utterly incredible.
Yeah, it was basically, I mean, to the point, I made a joke that everyone needed to be in a mask. They gave masks to everyone at ringside. All the dojo kids were in Shun Skywalker masks, and they had one of it for the ring bell. Also, it was an absolute celebration of someone who, more so, I think, really, that if we talk about those like 5-year eras case, other than Shima in 2000 2005. I don't think any person you really listed in those stretches became so like undeniably the person of the moment. It is Shun Skywalker's era. I might be a big fan of Yuki Yoshioka, but that's not even like that is like fandom versus reality about this. He is a guy that as soon as he came back from excursion, it's been off to the races, and he's never had a step astride. And you consider, like, over these time periods and these 5-year stretches, what's one of the big similarities between these people? It is the fact that you have the face runs and heel runs, and the fact that for Skywalker, more so than really Shingo 2011 to 2016, you only have 12 months of him as a heel. Akira Tozawa, you have about 15 months of him as a heel. And really, the shifting situation of Shima in 2000 to 2005, no one in that stretch had as much of a time as a heel as Shun Skywalker, to a point where I am of the belief that we'll be changing that window from 2020 to 2022 to 2027 when we get the next face turn, right? Like,
yeah,
most
maybe.
of these runs that we talk about in this 5-year period, not to further belabor the point, have like some of the best work coming after the heel turn, coming after, okay, we were face, now we have our big heel run. Think Akira Tozawa, think BB Hulk. They turn face, and then that's when they're really off to the races again.
Yeah, well, Yoshino is the perfect example.
Yeah,
you know, Yoshino
absolutely never turns back.
Yeah, he 2005 to the early part of 2008, he's Blood Generation, Muscle Outlaws. But the time period that I think of is World 1 and a Junction 3 and a World 1 International to Monster Express. And you're right, he never turns back. We all thought in 2017 or 2018 that he was going to turn back. He never did.
Yeah, so we still have the potential of that for Shun Skywalker. And when you like look at the main event of the show with Shun, Kota Minoura, and Hamare versus LIJ, Shingo Takagi, Hiromu Takahashi, and Bushi, what you really got in this kind of match was kind of like an aspect that we see when we watch some of this old footage where it's like, this match went on for half an hour. And this match went on for like 22 minutes, and it felt like a half hour in like the best kinds of ways because of just how they worked it around the idea of one Hamare in it, and then Shun Skywalker and Shingo Takagi's interactions, and even playing into all the current dissension happening between Minoru and Shun Skywalker in the finish. Bushi getting the Bushi roll after a hell of a cookie sheet attack. You really got to have like a full celebration of Skywalker to the extent that like afterwards he does like his promo, and he does like a full back bump afterwards, and it's just him all around us. It felt like after that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I went notebook on this match. I went 4 stars on it, and
I was 3 3/4. So
I think the quarter star higher is that I expected all these guys to dog it. I expected it to be a really, they do a ton of walk and brawls, but I expected this to be a really comedy heavy match that was going to be a lot of Shun and Bushi, and it was gonna be one of those things that was fun to look at, but not necessarily a good match. And it ends up being a ton of Hamare and Shingo, and I thought, just for what I was expecting, it way over delivered.
Yeah, and it's just like Hamare is such a fascinating wrestler and how he portrays himself. Like coming out of Rey De Parejas, like one of my big takeaways is, Hamare is like intentionally limited from like a in-ring style, being like just duck and choose, super kick, and Hamare cutters. But what you get to see instead is these interactions that he has with Shingo, where like Shingo completely no sells the super kick, and he's just like, no, I'm not doing that. And Hamare just like reacting to the ass kicking. And I thought that was really kind of an interesting facet where you have as much of a babyface Shun as we've had in 4 years, basically. And it like he does a almost picture perfect Masato Yoshino last gas kick out during this.
Yes.
And it's just such a fun match. I like that they brawled all the way over to the broadcast position where GM Saito was on color commentary, having to have an evening of just consumed by Shun Skywalker.
Yeah, the whole thing was just like a celebration of this thing that it does not get the mainstream credit that it deserves. And so it was just, it felt like almost like a VIP party for the hardcore Dragon Gate fan that has just been enjoying this so much over the last few years. And the New Japan guys brought it in a way that I wasn't expecting them to. And then the great thing is that the finish plays into the canonical storyline. Kota Minoura and Shun Skywalker have major issues with each other. There's clearly a camp divided. There's Shun and Hamare, and there's Minoura, and there's Jason Lee, and everybody else in Z-Brax is trying to work around the fact that these two sides are not getting along whatsoever. And so I thought for sure Hamare was going to eat Made in Japan, 1, 2, 3 matches over. Instead, Bushi pinned Shun Skywalker, and I was blown away by that too.
Yeah, I like the fact that on this show, that fitting to the tone, we had basically 3 bullshit finishes in a row. but tonally, on this produce show, of course, Rita unmasking someone, that should be a DQ, and Johnny Valletta should win by a count out, or win because there's like Johnny rules in play and a fake guitar shot DQ. Like, yeah, no, but it's Shun actually taking the fall on his show. And the more I get away from watching the match case, the more I like that, because it gives us so many more opportunities to have like, all right, I don't expect Shun Skywalker to go and do a G1. That just does not make sense.
I don't think that's happening. I saw some discussion about that. I'm not in that camp at all. And I don't think, and I could be wrong about this, I don't think Dragon Gate would let him do a Super Juniors because of the way that he's positioned in Dragon Gate.
Yeah, no, it usually the Daya situation works out better. It does not matter in Dragon Gate that Daya had a very underwhelming junior tournaments. Like, that's fine. Shun Skywalker, I think we spent 30 minutes talking about how different he is. Like, he's different. The most that you would probably do, other than coming in for like a Yamanashi special singles match, I could see being like a New Japan Cup appearance. Like, that is a situation where I think that they'd be okay if that happened for Shun,
Yeah,
you could explain away a knockout tournament a lot more than having Shun Skywalker go 1-6 and losing to Yoshihashi.
Yeah, I'm not saying the payoff. I
It
think
doesn't work.
I don't think Dragon Gate guys are coming to New Japan for this. I think if anything, we'll get more LIJ guys in Dragon Gate. I could see, depending on how World shakes out, Shingo and Naito against Shun and Homare. That wouldn't stun me. But
And that'd be a way to keep Shun out of the title picture again.
yeah, we got Kobe World title picture. We're gonna talk about it next week. I've been thinking about it a lot this week, but yeah, no, I don't see the need for that. I feel like the payoff is that everybody had a good time here, and that we're the score is settled and we're all good, and it's Shingo, so he's Dragon Gate family, and so we all just gonna move on with our lives from here. I don't see them doing a Shun Shingo singles match. I guess it's not impossible, especially on one of these shows, but I wouldn't expect that either.
Yeah, no. Instead, we got Shingo being proud of his book and doing mist comedy, which, for Shingo, I'm okay with him coming in here and doing that. Working our way down, we had Kai and Jason Lee versus Taiji Ishimori and X. This was the last match that was added on to the card, which kind of fitting that this is the way that Taiji Ishimori this is his second ever appearance in Dragon Gate. Like, that is a thing that has to go stated, just like the situation of that relationship. It's gotten better over the last 7 months, but that was the history. Ishimori's announced, and it was not really kind of even a thing one really thought of. But Ishimori was teaming with X that ended up being Sonata, and this turned into kind of Ishimori working heel against Jason Lee, which was fun, but a lot of Sonata and Kai, which worked with the tone of the show.
Sonata's a horrible pro wrestler. I try to avoid
He's really handsome though, and I think that's where people get mixed up.
I don't know, man. I try to avoid his matches. Like if I can go a New Japan show without watching him, I will. But I obviously had to watch him here. I mean, he's so bad. And there's nothing that he does that I like. And it's funny that, like, you're right, Ishimori being on this show is a big deal, but my eyes darted towards the fact that it was Kai and Sonata on this show. It's the
Muto
first
Dojo re-interacting together once again.
Muto Dojo reunites. It's the first time they've been in a ring with each other in 5 years. Last time they wrestled, they were a tag team, actually, in a trios. It was the Kohei Wada produced Destroyer Memorial Show, which I don't remember. This took place in Oda City, and the main event was Liger, Muto, and Miyahara against Bushi, Sonata, and Kai. I have zero memory of that. And then the time before that they wrestled each other, we have to go back to February of 2016, right before Sonata went to New Japan. They wrestled a singles match in Wrestle 1, and I talked about this a little bit in the Dragon Gate channel of Voices of Wrestling Discord, but for those that don't know, the reason it's notable that Kai and Sonata are in this match with one another is they came into All Japan at the same time. Kai debuted in Mexico. Sonata debuted in Japan. Kai, I guess this is something that maybe people don't realize now because it was so long ago, but Kai was an accomplished junior heavyweight in All Japan.
Yeah,
in the late 2000s, early 2010s. Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a Kai versus Omega match out there that's phenomenal. I mean, it's a completely different Kai than the one that you see today, but it's absolutely incredible. And then when All Japan moved Kai up to heavyweight, his first match was against Sonata. I believe he beat Sonata, and then very shortly after that, he got hurt. And by the time that he was healthy again, the Wrestle 1 Exodus had happened. And so the first Wrestle 1 show has Kai versus Sonata on it, and it becomes painstakingly obvious. I mean, they are telling the audience, this is the generational rivalry. These are the two aces. Kai says he's the ace. Sonata says he's the ace. We're building Wrestle 1 around Sonata and Kai. And they had a best of 5 singles match that I think ended up actually being 6 singles matches, like a weird thing there. And then that's 2014. And then, I'm sorry, that's 2013. In 2014, Sonata fucks off to America. He tries to get signed by NXT. He doesn't get there. He kind of fumbles all around the world in 2014 and 2015. And then I always mention this just as a historical anecdote. 2016, he was awesome in Big Japan before going to New Japan. And I've always been sad that we didn't get more of him in Big Japan. Whereas Kai stayed in Wrestle 1. And the reason that he was so maligned when he came into Dragon Gate was that he was Wrestle 1 champion. He beats Muto for the title and flops as hard as humanly possible as champion, loses the belt to Manabu Soya, and then starts doing the sort of John Moxley, Onita, like garbage wrestler character, and everybody hates it. I mean, Mike, would you say in 2015, Kai had the lowest approval rating of any Major League wrestler in the world?
I think that you had just this like 1-2-3 punch of really the Kai Russell 1 ace run was the thing that sent them down the road to its close. Like
oh my god, yeah. I mean, look, they never had a shot to begin with, but the Kai thing just it put a ceiling on that promotion that made people forever until the end of time not take it seriously.
Right. And then he leaves and then just gets like really deep into Onita fan worship. And that just colors everyone. I mean, to the extent that we were just expecting him in 2018 to just show up in jeans and a wife beater. And that's what we were expecting. And the fact that he showed up in gear was like a surprise to me in July of 2018.
Wrestle One was never a respected promotion, nor should they have been. Again, the only thing that ever drew in that promotion was Shima and T-Hawk and Lindemann, but it's hard to explain how irrelevant Wrestle One was, but how persistent Kai hatred was. Like, they didn't care about that promotion, but they were ambivalent towards it. And when the Kai Onita cosplay stuff happened, it became unbridled hatred at what they were witnessing. And it's why, like, now I almost hold Kai in like a special place in my heart, because the fact that he's a contracted Dragon Gate wrestler who is a former Dream Gate champion who's been as good as he has been, I get so annoyed when people sort of write off Kai now because they think about 2015 Kai. It's like, hold on, this guy's completely reinvented himself. He's adopted a new style. He's become such a strong fixture on this roster. But at the same time, I get it, because if you weren't there, it's just he was so hated at the time. And it all kind of goes back to this feud with Sonata. So it's worth noting that those guys shared the ring with each other for the third time in 9 years.
Yeah, the match in of itself kind of... it was interesting that they held off really on the crowd brawling up until the Johnny match. And then every single match after that, they got right into it. And that really was the focus here. Sonata does the old fake a weapon attack trick on Kai. Yagi sees it and calls a DQ. Kai wants to have a singles match against Sonata, which I guess has to happen, even though, Case, you've laid out the reasons why we don't want that to happen. Continuing our way back, we had the Battle of the Monsters as the Riki Dozen of Malta goes up against the 2-meter giant Shuji Ishikawa, and Johnny wins by countout.
I thought it's another feather in their cap. They've handled Valletta perfectly. I thought this was a perfect use of Valletta. This match should have had this finish. I was so disappointed watching the March 20th show where he chases a child through the crowd because I watched the show a few days after it happened. Nobody alerted me about that ahead of time. And it's like, guys, they've made a Brody knockoff gimmick feel fresh and exciting, and they should continuously get their roses. And this Ishikawa match, it was a Brody knockoff match, but it was great for what it was.
Yeah, and we had Yagi doing like the referee kind of bump for it, and he took for Yagi that felt like a real kind of thing. And I mean, the Mad Lads did it, Gates. Like, this is
a ton of fun.
Yeah. I like this match a lot more than his match against Luis Monte.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, like if we're ever going to do that experiment again, we have to allow them to crowd brawl and let that be someone who is the match against them. Because if not that, then basically it just was nice to see Johnny out of the Dragon Gate context and actually against someone that was game for it. And I mean, Ishikawa is someone that I'm very up and down on, and I felt like that this was a really fun performance here.
Played his role quite well.
The next match, the one through line case we have from Buyuden Zero to SSW Quest, we kind of got an MMA Rita match out of nowhere as Rita faced Masduzi, who very obviously was playing up that it was Fuminori Abe, and they kind of just worked the MMA Rita match kind of into a comedy thing. It was an absolute blast, and Rita loses by DQ when he finally gets frustrated and unmasks Abe. Abe does an entire whole bit about crawling back to the ringside or crawling to the back, but goes through the wrong way, so he has to crawl on the stage, and a good time was had by all.
If I were Dragon Gate, I would break into Sponge Guy's estate, take everything that he has and pay Abe all the money in the world to join their roster full time. I think he would absolutely crush it in this environment. This match was so much fun.
But he has to be Master Z, right?
That's fine. Yeah, no, put him in a henchman's mask, put a burlap sack over his head. I don't care. Get him on this roster full time.
Yeah, and the way that he worked with Rita and kind of playing off of a lot of the Rita things, but instead of kind of playing as a trickster kind of character.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, absolutely.
It just was like a really fun change of pace on the show, and just like another thing that was just like, oh yeah, no, Shun always has his Max Z, but now we have like his strongest Max Z, and secretly it is one of the tentacle masters of the wrestling world. We had a tag team match, Ishin and Kato versus Diamante, as we mentioned earlier on the show. During the Gifu opener, they brought out one of the mind control masks to get Diamante here, and under the Diamante mask, well, he was teaming with X. It was revealed to be Dragon Kid, and really two things to talk about here with this case. Luis Monte worked as heel Diamante as long as the mask was on, and it was basically turned into a 3-on-1 match until Dragon Kid unmasked him, and then you got basically standard Luis Monte. He pins Kato with the Super Tigre rebound, Hurricane Rana to win. And the second thing, Dragon Kid is back and he's moving around just fine.
Great to see. I was very entertained by the dynamics of this match. I liked Monte working as a heel while he had the mask on. He gets unmasked and he hit one of the meanest tope suicidas I've ever seen on Yoshiki Kato. And like you said, Dragon Kid is back. He appears to be healthy. It's what a great thing to see.
I'm blanking on his first name. Oh yeah, Katsuya Ishikawa on commentary, just marking out after the match when Dragon Kid does his human flag thing. He's like, "Oh, the human flag is back! How great is that to see?"
That's great. It was really fun stuff.
And this was preceded by the pre-show match. As we knew before this, the participation was mandatory for Yamato, Dragon Dia, and Kamei. And Shun Skywalker kind of put them into situations. Who would be the person that Yamato probably doesn't want to face? Well, it was KZ, who had all of his number during the month of February. Who does Dia not want to see across the ring from him? Well, it's Madoka Kakuta, who's openly talking about maybe D-Courage isn't it for him anymore. And who does Kamei want to have across the ring from him? Well, it's Hyo. So I guess we have some big hug things going. Fun opening 6-way pre-show match. As soon as it was getting towards the finish and a Frankensteiner of the Almighty was attempted, during a KZ time, Z-Brats hit the ring. They clear the ring. Shun Skywalker then opens the show to a incredibly long promo, basically extolling his greatness.
I cackled when Z-Brats came out. I did not see that coming. I thought that was so funny.
I mean, it's perfect. Shun put like people that he likes to torment against people that they probably don't want to be wrestling right now. And then right as the match was like feeling like a kind of like a house show 6-man tag main event, you're getting to the closing stretch. KZ's calling for KZ time, running it perfect.
Fantastic. Just absolutely fantastic. Made me laugh. It's the whole show. I mean, sit down, watch it from start to finish. I thought the Sonata stuff sucked, but that's just my feelings on Sonata, and it's why I don't like Yuya Uemura, is he reminds me of Sonata. It's a type of wrestler that I have no patience for whatsoever. But the dark match in matches 1 through 3, and then match 5, I mean, this was a home run, Mike. This was such a fun show with a great main event.
Yeah, and I felt like in the middle of a tournament that I think we would all say probably consistently 3.25 out of 5 going on for the whole month, having something just so inventive and different was such a needed breath of fresh air.
I couldn't agree more. So let's pivot to Rey De Parejas real quick. We have on our run sheet takeaways from this tournament. Mike, let's hold off on that until next week. Let's do that once we've seen the finals of this tournament. Do you have between March 20th and March 23rd any must-see match recommendations? I have 2 that I would recommend. Do you have any?
I from the Himeji show from the 20th, the main event was really, I thought that was the best thing on the show by far. KZ and Strong Machine J versus Yama Hulk. That was the thing I would go out on the Himeji show. We were waiting for the Okayama show to go up. Both of those matches ended up being like some of the best matches of the
Oh,
tournament.
that's right. I forgot that Ben and
Yeah.
Jr. versus Shun and
4
Hamari
stars.
was. Yeah, it was. I mean, there's a reason I wanted to see that match as bad as I did, and it ended up kicking ass. So I thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, and then getting on over to Gifu, I thought that the D Courage versus Mochizuki Dojo match was the best that Fuda has looked in maybe a long time. And you guys see some Gooch and Yoshioka, but it was
Those guys have awesome chemistry.
Yeah, no, that was really the highlight there. And then you had the Kakuta being doubtful because Dragon Dia has shown up, or Dragon Dia Inferno showed up a whole lot. Original Jimmy's versus Manoli, I thought it was solid stuff early. But I'll save this for more in depth than this last week. Kage's had a fun tournament. Kage has been great. And I mean, really, the thing to talk about off of that show is the outright monster cookie sheet spot that Shun hits Kota Minoura with in front of his hometown.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I'll slightly alter my recommendations. You're right. 315 Shun and Hamari versus Ben and Jr., which is on YouTube. You got to watch that. 320. The only match that I would recommend is a non-tournament match. I thought Monte versus UT in the opener.
That was a lot of fun. Yeah,
that was my style of wrestling. I want more guys to do whatever that was because that was
Monte's
a blast.
bringing the MCK as his finish right now, and I kind of like it for him.
Monte is still really good. Like we've just, I get it. The Dreamgate run wasn't what we all thought it was going to be or what it should have been, but he hasn't diminished in talent. And he's doing a lot of things right now that I really like. Really into Monte. I went notebook on the 323 main event, Kagetora and Susumu versus Jason and Minoura. And it's a story-heavy match, a lot of Z-Brats nonsense. But you know what? We're going to do takeaways of Rey De Parejas next week. Mike, I'll give you one of my takeaways right now. Kagetora and Susumu Yokosuka, MVP of the tournament. They have been phenomenal.
Guy, GM Ryo Saito, we might talk about this in Vegas, but the one thing I'll say is keep Kagetora into doing stuff, because when he's doing stuff, he's amazing.
He is like a sneaky top 50 guy in the world this year. Now, it's only March, that might change, but if I was going to make a top 50 list of Q1, Kagetora would have to be on that list.
I mean, he might be in the high 30s, but if I'm listening like the people that I've enjoyed most out of 2025, hey, the fact that Paradox are Triangle Gate champions has given Kagetora a lot of appearances on my notebook this year so far. So
yeah, I'm super into it. Okay, so as we record this, it's March 25th. You can tell I've got to go in like 5 minutes because I'm expediting this. But
yeah.
So
people who listen to podcasts at like 1.5 speed, we don't want to get into that. Case does his own little internal 1.25.
Yeah, it's 8 o'clock. I gotta get moving here.
It's the 2-minute warning you give me. I appreciate it.
So we record this on 325. When is this episode going to be out? 327?
Yep, 327.
Okay, great. So the final night of tournament play, of block play, I should say, is the 29th. With the finals in Kobe on the 30th. And I want to make sure before I expose myself by doing wrestling tournament math that it's all going to be worth it and that this episode isn't going to come out after 329. So I just want to be sure there. So there's 2 tournament matches left. Most of everything has been decided at this point. We know that in the A block, that Minoura and Jason Lee are advancing to the semifinals, and we know in the B block that Hyo and Jiro are advancing to the semifinals. The only A block match that is left is Rita and Kame versus Fuda and Daiki Yanagiuchi. So Kame and Rita, as we record, have 5 points.
Right.
As do Kato and Ishin, as do Susumu and Kagetora. But Susumu and Kagetora are out. They cannot advance because they've lost to both Jackie and Rita and Kato and Ishin. So this comes down to if Kame and Rita win, they advance. If they go to a time limit draw, they also advance.
Correct.
If they lose, Kato and Ishin advance to the semifinals.
Yep. Nope. That tracks.
Okay. The B block, we know Hyo and Jiro are going to advance. The final match in that block is one I'm very excited for. It's Shun and Homare against Mochizuki and Akira Sahara, which, by the way, we don't have the footage at the time of recording of the Totori show that happened on 322. I spoke to somebody that was there that said Mochi and Sahara versus Yamato and BB Hulk is one of the best matches they've seen this year. Now, this is a hardcore Dragon Gate guy. He only watches Dragon Gate, so I'm not comparing this to like Gabe Kidd versus Omega, but this person was raving to me about Sahara and Mochi versus Yamato and BB Hulk. So hopefully that pops up here real soon. The B block, like I said, Hyo and Jiro moving on. They have 8 points. Goddamn, they have 8 points. That's hard to look at.
They have the most points out of anyone in the tournament. They only lost to Yama Hulk.
They do. So Yamato and BB Hulk have 5. KZ and Strong Machine J have 6. Shun and Homare have 4. So Yamato and BB Hulk are going to be screwed no matter what because they're out of block matches. They don't have enough points. Logic would indicate that Shun and Homare, if they were to win, would have 6 points that would tie them with KZ and Strong Machine J. The issue for them is that KZ and Strong Machine J are going to have the tiebreaker because the Shun and Homare versus KZ and Strong Machine J match was won by Natural Vibes via forfeit because that is the show that Homare had to miss due to illness. So the B block as it stands is decided. It's Hyo and Jiro versus KZ and Strong Machine J. I say that with an asterisk because Homare had to forfeit that match, and that could factor into an angle on the 29th that leads into the 30th, assuming that Shun and Homare beat Mochi and Sahara. If they don't, then it's all for naught. KZ and Strong Machine J are going to advance no matter what anyways.
Yep, no, that all tracks with me. Yeah, and it really kind of sticks out, that match, now that we were talking before the show, and the more I look at it, I'm like, yeah, no, that definitely was a block match that turned out to matter a whole lot towards the end.
And then I believe, and this is my last note for this evening, so the semifinals are A block first place versus B block second place, B block first place versus A block second place. I believe the possible matches at this point are going to be... hold on. I'm not trusting my math now. Hold on.
It would be... let me attempt to do that.
Okay.
It would be because A block is going to be... Actually, no. A block could still be... If Jackie and Rita win, they win A block outright.
So it could be Jackie and Rita versus Strong Machine J and KZ, or it could be...
Ishin and Kata, or it could be Minoli versus SMJ and KZ. Yeah.
Or okay, so that's right. So it could be Jackie and Rita versus SMJ and KZ, or it could be Jason and Minora versus SMJ and KZ. And then the other matchup is either Jason and Minora against Hyo and Jiro, or Ishin and Kato against Hyo and Jiro.
Yeah, because if Jackie and Rita win, no matter what, they would they have a time limit draw, so they technically would be completely knotted up if it's a time limit draw. I don't know if they go to a coin flip at that.
Is this Ishin and Kato and Rita and Jack?
Oh, and it is if it ends up that Jack and Rita go time limit with Daiki and Fuda, that means that they're at 6 points, and that Minoli already finished at 6 points. They went time limit draw in that match.
Okay,
so
yeah, that's probably a coin flip then.
Yeah. That probably will not come into play. It's either that or drawing lots. I don't know what they're going to do for that.
So, do we think the finals is Jason and Minora against Ishin and Kato?
I think the finals end up being Jason and Minora versus SMJ and KZ.
Yeah, they both lost Dreamgate matches. They need a win.
Yeah, and at least with the way that they've booked SMJ since coming back from injury, he's not getting the stutter step that Yuki Yoshioka gets. He's been booked very, basically as if the last month never happened, basically. He was not on the shelf.
So here's, I guess, what would make the most sense, because I'm starting to think about Dead or Alive, and it seems like Jason and Minora are going to be in that cage match. So It would be beneficial to get the belts off of them. So I think what you have to do is you have to do Jason and Minoura versus Strong Machine J and KZ in the semis, and Ishin and Kato versus Hyo and Jiro in the semis. And then you have to have the Vibes team beat Jason and Minoura, and Z-Brats beat Hyo and Jiro, and then you have Strong Machine J and KZ beat Ishin and Kato in the finals. But then I think you have to do a Twin Gate match at the
Korakuen.
April Korakuen.
Mm-hmm. If you want to. I mean, looking at the schedule, yeah, it would have to be then.
Because they're not doing it in Fukuoka, and then they all leave for America. So that, they're not even going to be in town on the Sambo Hall show on the 19th.
Yeah, they do have that Edion show on the 26th.
They do, but man, would it be fun to have a 28 match headline Cork, and that almost never happens anymore.
Yeah, and Edion might be too late to do that, get the belts off them, and then also have the cage.
You know why? Because you'll do like a Road to Dead or Alive 6-man at Edion. You'll do whoever's in the cage. You'll have a 6-man with those guys.
Yeah, no. Well, we'll see how quickly our booking will go to shit this weekend.
Yeah, no, none of this will happen. It's actually it's going to be Akihiro Sahara and Masaki Mochizuki winning the tournament somehow. I'm sure that'll be what happens.
I am not going to object to that.
I spent so much time trying to figure this out today, and I'm sure it's all wrong.
Yeah, but we will be back next week with our other big takeaways of the tournament. It finishes up on Sunday in Sambo Hall, and we will be back talking about that and getting into the Dragon Gate USA Rebirth and Gate of Revolution shows. We have the full cards. Good for Dragon Gate being the first ones to be like, this is the card. Okay, we're done here.
Yeah, what a novel concept that is. Promote what you're going to run.
Knowing what a show's card's going to be less than 3 weeks before the big shows. But you could follow us on social media at Open Voice Gate. Case is on Twitter at _InYourCase. I'm at FujiHeya. Thanks for listening to VoiceGate. If you want to join in on the conversation, sign up to the Voices of Wrestling Discord, where we have a great Dragon Gate channel. It's probably one of the better places to chat about Dragon Gate, as well as the Open the VoiceGate channel. It has all of our listings for those days, as well as show notes and everything else there. If we have big announcements, they usually get posted there first. But that's going to do it for us this week. We'll be back with you talking Rey De Parejas next time. Take care, everyone.
Hello, everyone. My name is Taylor.
And I'm Kelly.
And we are the co-hosts of Jumping Bomb Audio, the #1 show all about the world of Joshi Pro Wrestling. Episodes drop every other Monday, where we discuss the biggest Joshi news, review shows, and preview the hottest upcoming Joshi action.
So whether you're a new fan or an old fan, we've got something here for you at Jumping Bomb Audio.
Check us out on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.